"I'm not your date," she said, but the CEO asked her to stay until dessert. Nora Callahan had 3 rules she lived by: never date a client, never wear white when delivering flowers, and under absolutely no circumstances sit down to dinner with a stranger just because he said the table's already reserved and the soup is getting cold. Tonight she had broken all 3. The white dress was technically ivory, which she had told herself was different, right up until she'd caught a peony smear across the hem at the 3rd delivery of the day, and accepted that ivory was in fact not different at all. The stranger thing was newer. She was still working out how that had happened. It had started, as most of Nora's more chaotic evenings did, with a very clear plan. The plan was, deliver the bouquet to Oleander, the kind of restaurant that had a concept rather than a menu, and where the chairs probably had a backstory. Collect the signature, and be home by 7:30 with the leftover Thai food she'd been thinking about since noon. The bouquet was a good one. She'd made it herself that morning. White ranunculus, garden roses, trailing jasmine, the kind of arrangement that communicated this evening matters without overselling it. The client had ordered it for a dinner. Something special, he'd said. She hadn't asked more than that. Florists learned quickly that specifics of other people's romantic plans were best handled at arm's length. She pushed through the front door of Oleander at 7:03, flowers in both arms, and immediately felt the ambient pressure of a room that cost more per entree than her first month's rent. "Delivery for Callahan," she told the host. "Floral arrangement, order placed Tuesday." The host, young, composed, with the particular energy of someone trained to be unflustered, looked at his tablet, looked at her, and smiled. "Right this way, Miss Callahan. Oh, I just need a signature and then your table is ready." She blinked. I'm sorry," but he was already moving, and 2 other parties were behind her waiting to check in, and the flowers were heavy, and she followed him through the soft lighting and the low music, and the tables of people, having the kind of evening she was fairly certain she was not about to have. He stopped at a table near the window. Set for 2, candle lit, a man already seated. The man looked up. He was, and Nora catalogued this the way she catalogued everything, quickly and with the detachment of someone who dealt in beauty professionally, and was therefore not easily derailed by it. Unreasonably good-looking in the specific way of someone who had never once in their adult life been told no by anything. Dark hair, very good jacket, the relaxed posture of a person accustomed to rooms arranging themselves around them. He looked at her with an expression she could not immediately read. She looked at him. She looked at the host, who was already retreating. She looked back at the man. "I think," she said carefully, "there's been a mistake." "Callahan," he said. "Yes, but Cole Whitfield." He stood, because of course he stood. The jacket was doing a lot of work, and apparently so were the manners, and nodded at the flowers. "Are those for the table?" "They're yes, technically, but—" She set them down on instinct, because they were heavy and her arms had made decision before her brain caught up. "I'm the delivery. I'm not—" "I think your host assumed I was my date," he said. "Not a question." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, which I'm not." She straightened. "I'm sorry. I'll just get a signature and head out. Do you have a pen, or should I?" "She canceled," he said. Nora stopped. 10 minutes ago." He said it without particular drama, the way you stated a fact you'd already processed and filed. Text. Very apologetic. Apparently something came up. He looked at her with an expression of complete composure. "So the table is technically available. That's—" "I'm sorry, that's not really. The truffle soup here has a 3-week wait list," he said. "I'm not telling you that as a sales pitch. I'm telling you because it's a fact, and you're clearly about to leave, and I thought you should have all the relevant information." Nora looked at him. She looked at the table, white linen, the flowers she'd made that morning sitting in the center, like they'd always been meant for this exact moment, the kind of ambient candlelight that a person really had no business standing next to while wearing even technically ivory. She thought about the leftover Thai food. She thought about the fact that she had eaten a granola bar at 6:15 a.m. and had not eaten anything since, because the Henderson wedding rehearsal order had taken 4 hours longer than expected, and she had mainlined coffee instead of lunch. She thought about truffle soup. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he agreed. "But you know the soup is good. I can see it on your face." She opened her mouth, closed it. She sat down. "This isn't a date," she said immediately. "Understood. I'm here for the soup. Completely reasonable. And I'll need that signature before I leave. Absolutely." He sat back down, reached for the menu, and handed it to her with the ease of a man who had just gotten exactly what he wanted and had the grace not to appear smug about it. Almost. "Do you want to start with the soup or the soup?" she said. He signaled the server. Nora sat across from a man whose last name she'd already forgotten, in a restaurant she couldn't afford, wearing a dress with a peony stain on the hem, next to flowers she had made with her own hands that morning. The candle flickered between them. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside the window, the city moved through its evening, indifferent and ongoing, and somewhere in the kitchen, a truffle soup was making its way toward a table, where two strangers sat with a candle between them and approximately nothing in common and no particular reason to stay past the first course. Nora picked up her water glass. Cole Whitfield looked at the menu like a man who had already decided to order everything. Nobody spoke first. Cole Whitfield's ideal evening had a specific architecture. The right wine, conversation that moved where he wanted it to move, and someone across the table who understood, without it needing to be said, that he was a person worth impressing back. It wasn't arrogance. Exactly, it was just the natural equilibrium of a life that had operated at a certain altitude for long enough that the altitude felt like ground level. Nora Callahan did not know who he was, and that, for reasons he couldn't immediately explain and wasn't sure he wanted to examine, was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in recent memory. The soup arrived. It was, objectively, excellent, the kind of thing that justified both the waitlist and the price point without apology. Nora took one spoonful, closed her eyes for approximately 1 second, and said, "Okay, fine," in the tone of someone conceding a point they'd been arguing against for years. Cole felt unreasonably pleased about this. "So," he said, "because someone had to, what do you actually do?" "Besides deliver flowers to strangers' dinners. I own the shop," she said. "Callahan & Co. Floral, East Side on the corner of 5th and Briar." She said it the way people said things they were proud of without being performative about it. Just a fact, but a fact she liked. 7 years. Started in my apartment with a folding table and a wholesale account I absolutely could not afford. And now? Now I have an actual shop. With a door and everything. She picked up her spoon again. "What do you do?" "CEO," he said. Waited for the response he usually got, the small recalibration, the slight shift in posture. The way people rearranged themselves when they understood what that meant. "Of what?" she asked, not recalibrating at all. "Whitfield Group." She looked at him with a pleasant, neutral expression. "I don't think I know that one." He blinked. "Real estate development, hospitality, a media division." She nodded in the way people nodded when they were being polite about not knowing something and also didn't feel particularly bad about it. "Is it interesting?" Cole opened his mouth, closed it. "Is it? Yes, it's," he paused. "Most people don't ask that." "What do they ask?" "They don't, usually. They already know the answer they've decided on." Nora considered this while eating her soup. "That sounds exhausting," she said, and meant it as a straightforward observation, which somehow made it land harder than if she'd been trying to make a point. He found himself talking less and listening more, which was not a pattern he recognized from his recent history. Nora had opinions about everything: wholesale pricing, the specific politics of wedding season, why certain flower combinations worked, and why certain clients could not be trusted with their own aesthetic instincts, and she delivered them with the unself-conscious specificity of someone who had simply never learned to be boring about things they cared about. "You have strong feelings about flowers," he said. "I have accurate feelings about flowers," she corrected. "There's a difference." "All right." He leaned back. "What about red roses?" She looked at him. "Classic," he said. "Timeless. The definitive romantic gesture. Agree or disagree?" "Lazy," she said without hesitation. "Excuse me? Red roses are what you order when you want to say 'I thought about this for 30 seconds, and then chose the first thing that came up." She set her spoon down to free up both hands for this, which told him she was genuinely invested. "They don't say 'I love you.' They say 'I Googled romantic flowers.' They're a classic for a reason. So is plain white toast. And nobody's calling that a romantic gesture. That's a completely different. Flowers have a language," she said. "They always have. Red roses say the same thing in the same way every single time. There's no thought in it, no specificity." She picked her spoon back up. "If someone actually knows you, they don't send red roses." Cole looked at her across the candlelight. "What do they send?" "Depends on the person." She said it simply. That's the whole point. He was quiet for a moment. The restaurant moved around them. Soft music, other conversations. The polite choreography of a room where people came to mark occasions. And he was aware, with some surprise that he had lost track of the time, which did not generally happen to him. "The bouquet you delivered tonight," he said. "What was in it?" "White ranunculus, garden roses, trailing jasmine." A small pause. "It was for a proposal. Client wanted something that felt like a real choice, not a default." Cole went still. Something about that, a proposal, tonight, snagged on something at the edge of his memory. He picked up his phone. "What?" Nora said, watching him. "Hold on." He opened his messages, found the thread with James, his oldest friend and the person who had texted him at 6:52 that evening. "With so sorry man, something came up tonight, rain check." He typed, "Are you proposing to someone tonight?" The reply came in 11 seconds. "Yes, and it's going perfectly. How did you know? Also, why are you at my table?" Cole stared at the screen. He typed back, "Your table, James. I made the reservation under my name, Callahan. My mom's maiden name. I always use it for personal stuff. Did the host seriously seat you at my—" A pause. Then, "Cole, I swear to God, if you are sitting at my proposal dinner table right now." Cole looked up, slowly. Nora was watching him with the expression of someone who had just started to understand the shape of something. "What?" she said. "The person who was supposed to be my date tonight," he said carefully, "canceled because he had a proposal to get to." He set the phone down. "His name is James Callahan. He made the reservation under Callahan. A beat. This is his table." The silence that followed had a very particular quality. Nora looked at the flowers in the center of the table, the ones she had made, the ones she had delivered to this table for this evening. "So," she said slowly, "neither of us is supposed to be here." "No," Cole said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The candle between them had burnt down a 1/4 inch since they'd sat down, which meant they'd been here longer than either of them had planned, and the soup bowls were empty, and somewhere across town James Callahan was presumably on one knee, and neither Nora nor Cole made any move whatsoever toward standing up. "Well," Nora said finally. She picked up the menu. "We should probably order something else then." Cole reached for his menu. "Obviously," he said. "There are decisions you make for good reasons, and there are decisions you make because the pasta looked better than anything you'd eaten in recent memory, and the conversation had just gotten to the part where it was actually going somewhere, and then an hour passes, and the original reason you stayed has quietly stopped being relevant, and you are still sitting there, and the candle is significantly shorter, and you have somehow gotten into a debate about whether tulips have personality." The original reason, for the record, had been the soup. Diane had materialized at their table at approximately the moment Cole put his phone away after the James revelation, appearing from somewhere in the mid-distance with the purposeful warmth of a woman who had managed this dining room for 11 years, and had developed, over that time, strong opinions about which tables were having evenings that mattered. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, with the particular brightness of someone who already knew the answer. "We were actually just—" Nora started. "The tagliatelle is exceptional tonight," Diane said, to no one in particular. "And the kitchen just started a new batch of the short rib." She smiled at them both with the serenity of someone operating on a frequency slightly above the conversation. "I'll give you a moment." She left before either of them could redirect the situation. "She's not going to let us leave," Nora said. "No," Cole agreed, "she really isn't." The tagliatelle arrived 12 minutes later, which meant they had technically ordered it, although neither of them could quite reconstruct the moment that had happened. Diane set it down with the quiet satisfaction of a person whose plan was proceeding on schedule. Somewhere between the pasta and the point of the evening, where the restaurant had thinned out, and their table felt less like a public place and more like its own small atmosphere, they started playing the game. It had begun when Nora said, unprompted, "Okay, if you weren't a CEO, what would you be?" Cole considered this with more genuine effort than she'd expected. "Architect," he said finally, "I think. I'm interested in how spaces work." "That tracks," she said. "You walked into this room like you were assessing load-bearing walls." "I did not." You looked at the ceiling. He had, in fact, looked at the ceiling. "Your turn, if not flowers. Flowers are non-negotiable," she said. "Try again." "Fine. What did you think you'd be when you were 12? She thought about it. "Marine biologist. Really. I liked the idea of things that existed in conditions that should be impossible." She shrugged. "Flowers aren't that different, actually. Getting something living to hold its shape in the right moment. The conditions have to be exactly right, or the whole thing falls apart." She said it matter-of-factly, the way people said things they'd figured out privately over a long time. Cole looked at her for a moment. "What do you think I would have been, if not this?" Nora studied him across the table, with the focused assessment of someone who was genuinely trying to see something accurately. She took her time. He let her life insurance, she said. Very confident life insurance salesman. You have the posture of someone who can make a person feel like they've made a great decision while signing something they don't fully understand. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough to be uncomfortable. That is, he started. You asked. I did, he said. And then, to his own evident surprise, he laughed. Not the social version, not the one that smoothed things over and kept the room comfortable. An actual laugh, short and real. The kind that happened when something landed before you could decide how to respond to it. Nora noticed the difference immediately. It changed his face entirely, the laugh, made him look like someone younger and considerably less managed. She looked back at her plate before he could notice her noticing. She told him about the shop the way she always did when someone actually asked, which was to say, without editing herself for the audience. The slow early years, the client who cried over peonies at her own wedding, in a way that made Nora understand for the first time what her work was actually for. The Tuesday morning wholesale runs at 5 a.m. The particular satisfaction of a difficult arrangement coming together in the last 10 minutes before. A deadline. Cole listened, not in the way people listened at dinner when they were constructing their next sentence. Actually listened, the way you listened to something you hadn't heard before and weren't sure you'd hear again. You really love it, he said. It wasn't a compliment. Just an observation, said with something that might have been recognition. I really do, she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. He turned his wine glass once, twice. I can't remember the last time I did something that wasn't strategic, he said. It came out quieter than he'd meant it to, she could tell. The kind of admission that arrived before the filter caught it. He looked at the glass. Like, the last time I did something only because I wanted to, not because it served something else. Nora looked at him. She gave it a beat, the way the moment deserved. That is the saddest thing I've heard all evening, she said. And I just listened to you argue for 4 minutes that tulips lack personality. Tulips are cheerful, reliable, and underestimated, she said firmly. Like a lot of good things, she held his gaze. You were wrong about the tulips. And you're describing a life that sounds very efficient and not particularly lived in. Cole said nothing. He didn't argue, which she suspected was more significant than anything he might have said. The restaurant was quiet around them now. A few tables remaining. Candlelight lower, the specific hush of a place winding toward the end of its evening. Their table felt, in a way Nora couldn't quite account for, like the last lit room in a long building. Diane appeared at the periphery with the dessert menus, right on cue, wearing the expression of a woman who had orchestrated this exact moment and was experiencing appropriate professional satisfaction. She set the menus down between them. Nora looked at hers. She thought about the time. She thought about the drive home, the studio, the orders waiting for tomorrow. She picked up her bag from the back of the chair. I should probably stay for dessert, Cole said. Not a question, not quite an order, something in the space between those two things, a request that knew what it was asking and had decided to ask. Anyway, Nora looked at him across the guttered candle and the remains of an evening that had started as a delivery and had become, without anyone's formal permission, something else entirely. She set her bag back down. Diane removed the dessert menus from the table and returned 2 minutes later with whatever she'd decided they were having, because at this point she was running the evening and everyone present understood that. Nora didn't look at what it was. She was looking at the man across the table, who was looking back at her, and neither of them was pretending, anymore, that the soup was the reason they'd stayed. Nora had a rule about men like Cole Whitfield, not a written rule, more of a working knowledge, the kind you developed not from theory, but from having lived through the specific experience of someone walking through your front door with enough confidence and warmth to rearrange all your furniture, staying long enough that you forgot what the room used to look like, and then leaving, not dramatically, just leaving, and taking with them whatever it was that had made the room feel like yours. She knew this rule well. She had learned it at 25, from a man named David who wore good suits and had excellent taste in restaurants and always had a reason for everything that sounded, on close inspection, less like feeling and more like calculation. She was not 25 anymore. They had walked after dinner. Nobody suggested it. They had simply both moved toward the door at the same time, stepped out into the cool of the evening, and continued in the same direction without discussing it. The way you did when stopping felt more deliberate than continuing. The city was doing its late evening thing around them. Cabs, a few restaurants still lit, the particular quiet of a Tuesday night that had nothing to prove. Cole had his jacket over one arm. Nora had her bag over her shoulder and her keys already in her hand, which was a habit, not a signal, though she was aware it could be read as one. They talked about nothing specific. The neighborhood. A bookstore she liked that he'd walked past 100 times without going in. The odd acoustics of the block near the parking garage that made it sound like you were inside something. At the corner where she'd left her van, she stopped. "This is me," she said. He looked at the van, white with Callahan & Co. in green lettering on the side. A smudge of what was probably pollen on the rear door. Then at her. "Can I call you?" he asked, straightforward, no preamble. She gave him credit for that. "You don't have my number," she said. "I'm aware. That's why I'm asking first." She looked at him in the amber light of the street lamp. He looked back with the particular patience of someone who could wait but would prefer not to. "I'll think about it," she said. Got in the van, drove away. In her rearview mirror he was still standing on the corner. She thought about it for 4 days, which was 3 days longer than she'd intended, and 1 day shorter than she'd hoped would settle the question. It didn't settle. He showed up instead. Not at her apartment. He didn't have that information, and she noted, with reluctant approval, that he hadn't tried to find it. He showed up at the shop on a Thursday afternoon, at the reasonable hour of 2 o'clock, wearing a slightly less formal jacket than the dinner one, and carrying nothing except, apparently, a position. The bell above the door rang. Nora was rewrapping a damaged stem at the workbench and looked up. Cole Whitfield stepped in to Callahan & Co. and looked around with the careful attention he gave to all spaces, then looked at her. "I listened to a podcast," he said. She set down the stem. "Okay, about floriography, the language of flowers." He said it with the directness of someone delivering a briefing. 47 minutes. "There were also 2 academic sources I found afterward, which I'll admit was more than strictly necessary." Nora looked at him. "Why?" "Because you said red roses were lazy, and I wanted to find where your argument broke down." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced his phone, which had notes on it. Actual notes. She could see the scroll length from where she stood. "I have a rebuttal." She stared at him. "You researched an argument," she said slowly, "about flower symbolism. The Victorian language of flowers is more codified than you implied. Red roses have a specific and well-documented, historical significance that predates the commercial." He stopped. "You're standing in my flower shop," she said, "with notes, yes, to argue with me about roses. To continue a conversation," he said. "The roses are the vehicle." Something shifted in her chest, small and inconvenient. She recognized it with the weary clarity of someone who had felt it before and knew exactly what it cost. She came around the workbench and leaned against it, arms crossed, looking at him standing among her buckets of ranunculus and sweet peas and the Tuesday delivery of garden roses she hadn't yet sorted, this very expensive, very prepared man who had listened to 47 minutes of floriography podcasts to find a reason to come back. The wall she maintained, polite, solid, held in place by one specific memory, shifted slightly on its foundation, not enough to show, enough to feel. She was about to say something that would decide the direction of this, and she hadn't yet worked out what it was, when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, declined it. It rang again immediately. "Sorry," he said. A small tension at the corner of his jaw, he answered. "Rex. I'm in the middle of—" She could hear the voice on the other end, efficient and slightly anxious, the way assistants sounded when they were managing too many moving pieces. "Dutch partners confirmed for 3, and you have the Meridian call at 4:30, and also Miss Sinclair's office followed up. She wanted to know if you're keeping Fridays. Reservation. They need to confirm the booking by end of day." The shop was small and quiet, and there was nowhere for the words to go except directly, across the space between them. Nora heard everyone. She watched Cole's expression do something, a small internal adjustment, the micro-recalibration of a person managing contexts, and she knew that expression. She had seen it before, on a different face, and she knew what it meant. It meant there were other rooms she didn't know about. "I'll call back," he said, and ended it. He looked at her. She had already moved back to the workbench. She picked up the stem she'd been rewrapping and found a task in it, the way she found tasks in things when she needed somewhere to put her hands. "Thank you for the lesson," she said. Her voice was even, warm, professionally pleasant in a way she had learned from years of client-facing work and one very specific heartbreak. "You make a decent case for the roses." She smiled at him, the complete smile, the one that reached her eyes because she'd had practice making it reach her eyes. "I hope Friday's good." The silence in the shop lasted several seconds. Cole stood very still with his phone in one hand and his notes in the other, surrounded by flowers in every direction, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like a man who had arrived somewhere without a next move. She turned back to the workbench. The bell did not ring for a long time. When it did, she didn't look up. She rewrapped the stem, started on the next one. Outside, the afternoon continued its ordinary business, and inside the shop it smelled like roses and greenery, and the particular atmosphere of a room where something had almost happened and then, with the quiet precision of old habit, hadn't. Cole Whitfield had known in the abstract that some things couldn't be acquired, couldn't be strategized or researched or resolved with sufficient preparation. He'd known this the way educated people knew things they'd never actually needed to apply, as a concept held at a comfortable theoretical distance. He hadn't cared enough, with anyone, to find out what it felt like when the concept became personal. Then a florist told him red roses were lazy and walked away before he could disagree, and the theoretical distance closed entirely, and he was left standing in a flower shop with notes he'd prepared and nowhere useful to put them. He canceled Friday on Thursday morning. He did it himself, didn't have Rex make the call, didn't send an email from the assistant's account. He called Miss Sinclair's office directly, was professional and brief, and apologized for the late notice. It was the right thing to do, and he did it cleanly. It had nothing to do with Nora. That was the part he needed to be honest about, at least with himself. It had to do with the fact that he'd been sitting in his car after leaving the flower shop, replaying the evening at Oleander, the real one, the one that hadn't been planned, and understanding with uncomfortable clarity that he had been attending his life for years the way you attended a meeting you'd already read the summary for. Present, prepared, elsewhere. He didn't want to go to another dinner where he was elsewhere. He didn't call Nora. He understood, without needing it explained, that another phone call wasn't the right move. She had a wall and she'd built it for reasons, and the worst thing he could do was knock on it again, with more words. He thought about what she'd said instead, about things that existed in conditions that should be impossible, about how specificity was the point. He opened the order form for Callahan & Co. on a Friday morning and filled it out for the company's annual donor reception the following week. 200 guests, standing cocktail format, florals needed for 12 arrangements and a centerpiece installation. In the special instructions field, he typed, "Not red roses, your choice." "I trust you." He submitted it, closed the laptop, went back to work. Nora read the note 3 times. She sat with the order form on the workbench for longer than the task required, long enough that her assistant Maya leaned over, read it, and said, "Huh," in the specific tone of someone drawing conclusions she hadn't been asked to share. "Your choice. I trust you." 6 words in a floral order form, unremarkable on their face. She had received variations of this instruction before, clients who didn't know what they wanted and said so. It was common. It didn't usually feel like this. She chose orange ranunculus, garden roses in cream and blush, trailing amaranthus, deep burgundy, arrangements that had warmth without sentimentality, color without noise, things that looked like they meant something specific because they did. She delivered them herself on the evening of the reception. The event was on the 14th floor of a building with too much glass and a view that knew it. 200 people in their best versions of professional. The low roar of a room at full occupation, past appetizers, and the particular performance of people being seen in the right room. Nora moved through it efficiently with her team, checking the arrangements, adjusting a stem on the centerpiece installation that had shifted in transit. She was nearly done, had her coat already over her arm, was mentally already back in the van, when she looked up and found Cole crossing the room, toward her, not working the room, not pausing to exchange words with the people who reached for him as he passed, though several did, moving with the straight, unhurried intention of someone who had identified where they needed to be and was going there. He stopped in front of her. Around them the room continued its business, indifferent and loud. "I canceled Friday," he said. "I know." She held his gaze. Rex isn't great with confidentiality. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Then it settled, and he looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. No management in it, no strategy. Just a person standing in a room deciding to be honest. "I don't know how to do this correctly," he said. "I want to be upfront about that." The last time I did everything right, I was sitting at the wrong table arguing about flowers with the delivery person. A beat. So correct probably isn't my strong suit. Nora looked at him. Then she looked at the centerpiece installation behind him, the ranunculus she'd chosen, orange and full, catching the light from the overhead fixtures in a way that made them look almost lit from within. Then she looked back at him. "What did you order?" she asked. "For the arrangements. Do you know what it is?" He glanced back at the flowers. "I don't know the name. Orange. They look like they're trying to say something." "Ranunculus," she said. "In the language of flowers, it means I am dazzled by your charms." Cole looked at her steadily. "I didn't know that." "I know you didn't," she said. "That's why I chose it." The room moved around them, glasses and conversation and the ambient noise of 200 people having a calculated evening, and neither of them was in any part of it. Just this small, still point in the middle of everything, canape trays passing at the periphery, the orange ranunculus burning quietly in the background. "Come on," she said. They left before the program started. Neither of them had eaten. Cole had been managing the event for 2 hours, and Nora had come straight from a delivery. And they walked until they found a place still open, small and lit warmly from the inside, the kind of establishment that had desserts listed on a chalkboard above the counter, and chairs that didn't match. Nora pushed the door open and stopped. Behind the counter, arranging something with the focused attention of a person whose work was never truly done, was Diane. She looked up. She took them in, both of them, together, at this hour, walking into her dessert cafe, and her expression arranged itself into the precise configuration of a woman who had known something was going to happen and had been waiting for it to. "I knew it," she said simply. "Of course you did," Cole said. Diane waved them toward a table by the window. Small, 2 chairs, a candle that she lit with a match from her apron pocket as if she'd been saving. She brought them 2 things from the chalkboard without asking what they wanted, set them down, and retreated with the dignity of someone whose work was complete. Nora looked at the table, the dessert untouched, the candle. She looked at Cole across the small, warm space. "Are you sure you have the right table this time?" she asked. Cole looked back at her, unhurried, certain, in the way of someone who had taken a very long route to a simple place and recognized it when he arrived. "This time," he said, "yes." The candle held its light between them. Outside, the city moved through its evening, same as always. Inside, 2 people picked up their forks at the same moment, and nobody was anywhere else but there. And that's the thing about the moments that actually change you. They almost never look like what you planned. They look like a wrong table, a canceled date, a bouquet meant for someone else, a stranger who doesn't know your name, and because of that, sees you more clearly than anyone who does. Cole spent years being exactly where he was supposed to be. The right room, the right reservation, the right version of himself. And the night everything actually started, he was sitting at the wrong table, eating someone else's soup, arguing about flowers with a woman who had absolutely no reason to stay. Nora had a wall, built carefully, for good reasons, from real pain. But walls don't know the difference between the person who hurt you and the person who listened to 47 minutes of flower podcasts just to find a reason to come back. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't a grand gesture. It's ordering flowers and writing, "Your choice, I trust you." It's saying, "I don't know how to do this correctly," and showing up anyway. It's staying for dessert when every sensible part of you is already reaching for your coat. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The right people don't always arrive on time. They arrive on the wrong night, at the wrong table, carrying flowers they made for someone else's love story. And somehow, that's exactly right. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been Nora with her wall, or Cole with his notes and nowhere to put them, hit subscribe. Leave a comment below. Tell me, are you more of a Nora or a Cole? I'll read every single one. See you in the next story.